It started last November during one of the coldest winters Boston had seen in years. Ashley, my wife of 12 years, began talking about this exclusive poker club she'd discovered through one of her real estate clients. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She'd always been social and outgoing, traits that made her excellent at her job selling luxury properties. "It's just something different, Nathan. I need a break from the routine," she said, her hazel eyes gleaming with that persuasive look I'd grown to love. "It's just a phase. You know how I get when I find something new." I did know. Ashley had always been like that, passionate about new interests, though they usually faded after a few months. But this was different. The poker night started as a once-a-week thing, every Thursday. Then came the subtle changes. First, it was the new clothes. Ashley had always dressed well. Her job required it, but suddenly she was buying new outfits. That seemed different. More revealing, more expensive. Her signature honey blonde hair, which she'd always worn in elegant waves, was now regularly styled in sophisticated updos. The familiar vanilla perfume she'd worn for years was replaced by something more exotic and intense. The late-night texts started next. The soft ding of her phone would break the silence of our modern luxury condo at odd hours. When I'd glance over, she'd quickly turn the screen away. "Just the poker group chat," she'd say with a dismissive wave. Then came the changes in her work schedule. Ashley had always been successful in real estate, but suddenly she was showing properties at unusual hours. Dinner meetings became more frequent. The poker nights extended longer and longer. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something in my gut told me to look. The message preview showed, "Last night was incredible. Same time next week?" It was from someone named James P. My heart stopped. I knew Ashley had a client named James Peterson, some hotshot businessman who'd recently moved to Boston. She'd mentioned him a few times, always in the context of showing him luxury properties. But this wasn't about real estate. When I confronted her about it, Ashley's response was too rehearsed, too smooth. "Oh, he's just excited about a property I showed him. You know how these high-end clients are. They get enthusiastic about the perfect home." But her eyes, those expressive hazel eyes that could never hide anything from me, told a different story. There was a flicker of something I'd never seen before. Guilt, maybe? Or was it defiance? That night, as we lay in bed in our expensive condo with the Boston winter howling outside our windows, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. My wife of 12 years was lying next to me, but she felt miles away. The poker, club, the late nights, the texts, the new clothes. It was all starting to form a picture I wasn't ready to see. Little did I know this was just the beginning of my nightmare. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was unraveling. The professor in me took over. I needed evidence, facts, something concrete to either confirm my fears or put them to rest. I started paying attention to every detail of Ashley's movements, keeping a mental log of her poker nights and client meetings. The first real evidence came in the form of a crumpled receipt I found while doing laundry. It had fallen from her coat pocket, a valet ticket from the Four Seasons Hotel, dated for a Thursday afternoon when she was supposedly at her poker club. My hands trembled as I smoothed out the paper, the date and time staring back at me like an accusation. I began my investigation in earnest. Each morning, after Ashley left for work, I'd check her home office, looking for any clues. It wasn't long before I found more hotel receipts carefully hidden in a folder marked Property Viewings 2024. The Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, even the boutique 15 Beacon, all on days when she was supposedly showing properties or playing poker. 1. Morning. Our neighbor Carol caught me as I was leaving for the university. "Nathan," she said, her voice lowered conspiratorially. "I've been meaning to talk to you. I saw Ashley last week at La Voile with that handsome client of hers. James, is it? They seemed very comfortable with each other." My stomach churned. La Voile was our special place, the restaurant where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary just 2 years ago. I thanked Carol and walked to my car, my mind racing. That night, Ashley had told me she was showing a property in Cambridge. When I confronted her about the restaurant, she had an explanation ready. Of course I was there with James. He's interested in several high-end properties, and you know how these deals work. It's all about building relationships. "At our anniversary restaurant?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't be ridiculous, Nathan. It's just business. You're reading too much into this." Her voice was calm, but her fingers nervously twirled her wedding ring, a tell she'd had since the day I proposed. That weekend, while Ashley was showing properties, I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove to her office. Her car wasn't there. I checked the properties she'd mentioned showing that day. Nothing. Finally, I drove past the Four Seasons, and there it was, her white Mercedes parked in the hotel lot. I sat in my car, staring at her vehicle, feeling sick to my stomach. A few hours later, I watched as she emerged from the hotel's side entrance, followed shortly by a tall, well-dressed man I recognized from her office's website as James Peterson. They walked separately, but the furtive glance they shared told me everything I needed to know. That night, Ashley came home late, claiming she'd had a successful day of showings. As she chatted about fictional property viewings, I felt like I was watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. The woman I'd married, the one who used to curl up against me during Boston's harsh winters and laugh at my terrible academic jokes, had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I went to bed that night with a hollow feeling in my chest, knowing that tomorrow I would have to confront the truth that was becoming increasingly impossible to ignore. The following week was a blur of discoveries, each more painful than the last. I started digging deeper into James Peterson's background, and what I found made my blood run cold. He wasn't just any businessman, he was a real estate investor who'd been working closely with Ashley's firm for months. The poker club was never real, it was just a cover for their meetings. I hired a private investigator, something I never imagined I'd do in my life. The evidence he gathered was devastating. Photos of them entering and leaving hotels, intimate, dinners at expensive restaurants, even a weekend trip to New York they'd both conveniently scheduled for business purposes. The investigator also discovered that James was a regular donor to several charitable organizations, including the annual real estate gala where Ashley had started volunteering. But the final blow came when I decided to check our shared iPad. Ashley had forgotten to log out of her email account. There they were, hundreds of messages between them, dating back 6 months. The contents made me physically ill. They discussed their encounters in detail, planned their meetings, and even joked about their poker nights. Some messages mentioned mutual friends who knew about their affair, people we had dinner with regularly, couples we'd vacationed with. One email particularly stood out. Ashley had written, "Nathan's so absorbed in his academic world, he doesn't suspect a thing. It's almost too easy." James's response was equally cruel. These intellectual types never see what's right in front of them. I sat in my home office for hours, reading through their correspondence, each message feeling like a knife to my chest. The woman in these emails wasn't the Ashley I knew, or thought I knew. She was calculating, cruel even, discussing our marriage as if it were nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle. That evening, when Ashley came home, I was waiting in the living room. Through our floor-to-ceiling windows, the Boston skyline glittered against the dark winter sky, a view we'd both fallen in love with when buying this condo. Now it felt like a backdrop to my personal tragedy. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "About James, the poker club, and all the lies." Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, and finally a kind of resigned defiance. "How did you find out?" she asked, not even attempting to deny it. I wordlessly handed her copies of the emails I'd printed. As she flipped through them, her hands trembling slightly, I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. How long had that been going on without me noticing? "It's not what you think," she started, but I cut her off. Just don't. "I read everything, Ashley, everything, including how you and James laugh about me with our friends. How long have they known? How long have I been the fool in this story?" She sank into our designer armchair, the one she'd insisted on buying last spring. Probably with James's input, I now realized. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered, but her words rang hollow. "You never meant for me to find out," I corrected her. "There's a difference." The truth was finally out, but this was just the beginning of an even more painful chapter in our story. The following weekend, we had a long-standing commitment to attend a charity gala at the Boston Harbor Hotel. Ashley suggested we skip it, but I insisted on going. I needed to see firsthand who among our friends had been complicit in her deception. As we entered the grand ballroom, I felt like I was walking into a theater where everyone knew their role except me. The evening was excruciating. I watched as Ashley navigated the room with practiced ease, her black designer dress drawing admiring glances. I noticed how our friends exchanged subtle looks when we approached together. Their smiles seemed forced, their conversations awkward. Every laugh, every whispered conversation, every sidelong glance felt like a confirmation of their betrayal. Then James arrived. He walked in confidently, wearing an expensive suit and that smug smile I'd seen in the investigators' photos. The room's dynamics shifted immediately. I observed as Ashley carefully maintained her distance from him, but their eyes met several times across the room. Our mutual friend Tom, who I'd known for 15 years, actually patted James on the back like an old friend. "Nathan, you're being paranoid," Ashley had whispered when she noticed me watching. "People will start talking if you keep acting like this." "People are already talking, Ashley," I replied coldly. "They have been for months." The breaking point came during dinner. I was seated next to Linda, one of Ashley's closest friends. After several glasses of wine, she let slip something that made my blood freeze. "I tried to warn her, you know," Linda said, not meeting my eyes. "I told Ashley that someone would eventually notice them at the Cape House." "The Cape House?" I asked, my voice barely controlled. Linda's face went pale as she realized her mistake. The Cape House belonged to her and her husband, a vacation home where we'd spent many summers together. The pieces fell into place, all those weekend property showings in Cape Cod. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The conversations around our table died. Ashley looked up, her face draining of color as she saw my expression. "The Cape House, Ashley?" I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Was that part of the poker club too?" The room fell silent. James, seated 2 tables away, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Our friends looked anywhere but at me, their complicity written all over their faces. Ashley tried to reach for my arm, but I pulled away. "Nathan, please," she whispered urgently. "Not here." Why not here? I asked, my voice rising. Everyone here already knows. They've all been watching this show for months. The dinners, the weekends, the lies. They've all been part of it. People were staring now. I saw phones being pulled out, undoubtedly recording what would become tomorrow's gossip. I didn't care anymore. You all knew, I said, looking around at our supposed friends. Every single one of you sat across from me at dinner parties, played golf with me, celebrated holidays in our home, all while knowing what was happening. The silence was deafening. Even James had the decency to look uncomfortable. Ashley stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run. As I walked out of the ballroom, I heard the whispers start up behind me. Let them talk, I thought. They'd been doing it for months anyway. The bitter winter air hit my face as I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. The cold inside me was far worse. That night marked the end of not just my marriage, but of 15 years of friendships I had thought were real. The days following the gala were a blur of anger and confrontations. Ashley had temporarily moved to a hotel, but not the Four Seasons. Even she realized that would be too brazen. Our luxury condo, once our pride and joy, felt like a museum of lies, each room holding memories I now questioned. I was grading papers in my home office when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found myself face to face with James Peterson. He stood there in an expensive coat, looking simultaneously confident and uncomfortable. "We need to talk, Nathan," he said, as if he had any right to be there. Against my better judgment, I let him in. Perhaps I needed this confrontation for closure. He walked into our living room, looking around at the space he'd probably heard so much about from Ashley. "I'm not here to apologize," he started, straightening his tie. "But I think you deserve to know the full story." "The full story?" I laughed bitterly. "About how you and my wife made a fool of me? Or about how our entire social circle watched it happen? It wasn't planned," he continued, ignoring my sarcasm. "Ashley and I met at a property showing, and things just developed. She was unhappy, feeling trapped in—" I cut him off. "Spare me the rationalization, James. I read the emails, I saw the photos. This wasn't some passionate affair that just happened. You both methodically planned this for months." He had the audacity to sit down on our couch, the same couch where Ashley and I had spent countless evenings together. "Look, I'm not the first, Nathan. Ashley told me about her previous indiscretions." The room seemed to tilt. "Previous what?" "Oh," he said, with fake concern that barely masked his satisfaction. "She never told you about the others? The conference in Chicago 2 years ago? The real estate convention in Miami?" Each word felt like a physical blow. Ashley had attended those events. I'd even helped her pack for Chicago. The realization that her infidelity went back years made me physically ill. Just then, Ashley walked in. She still had her key. She stopped short when she saw us both. "James, what are you doing here?" "Telling your husband what you should have told him years ago," he replied coolly. The next hour was a nightmare of revelations. Ashley, caught between us, finally broke down and admitted everything. There had been others before James. "Not many," she insisted, as if that mattered. Each confession felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she kept saying, mascara running down her face. "You never meant for me to find out," I repeated, my words from before. "Everything else was exactly what you meant to happen." James stood up to leave, but I wasn't finished. "You know what the worst part is?" I said to both of them. Not the affairs, not even the lies. It's the fact that you turned our entire life, our friends, our home, our memories, into a joke. You made me live in a world where everyone knew the truth except me. Ashley tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. Nathan, please, we can work through this. It was just a phase. I can change. A phase? I cut her off. Multiple affairs over years isn't a phase, Ashley. It's who you are. After they both left, I sat alone in our living room, watching the snow fall over Boston through our expensive windows. Tomorrow, I would call a divorce lawyer. Tonight, I would allow myself to mourn the death of a marriage that I now realized had been a lie for years. The divorce proceedings were as brutal as I expected. Ashley tried to paint herself as the victim of a loveless marriage, claiming my dedication to academia had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. Her lawyer, an expensive shark from downtown Boston, attempted to justify her actions as a response to emotional abandonment. I sat through it all, watching as the woman I'd loved for 12 years tried to rewrite our entire history. The revelations kept coming during the discovery process. Credit card statements revealed hidden shopping sprees, secret weekend getaways, and gifts bought for various men. Our mutual friends, perhaps out of guilt, started reaching out with more stories. Each new detail felt like reopening a wound that refused to heal. The university community, thankfully, rallied around me. My colleagues, many of whom had their own stories of betrayal, provided unexpected support. Dr. Jennifer Matthews, my department head, adjusted my teaching schedule to accommodate the endless meetings with lawyers. My students, though they didn't know the details, showed understanding when I occasionally seemed distracted during lectures. James, it turned out, had moved on to another married woman barely 2 months after the confrontation. Ashley found this out the hard way when she saw him at a real estate function with his new conquest. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sold my share of the condo to Ashley. I couldn't bear to live there anymore. Every room held memories that had been tainted. I found a small but comfortable apartment near the university, somewhere I could start fresh. The process of moving out was surreal. 12 years of marriage reduced to boxes labeled Nathan's things. One afternoon, while packing, I found our wedding album. Ashley looked radiant in the photos, her hazel eyes sparkling with what I thought was love. Now I wondered if she had been faithful even then. I donated the album to a thrift store, along with most of our shared possessions. The divorce was finalized on a cold spring morning. As I left the courthouse, I felt both hollow and somehow lighter. Ashley had gotten her freedom, along with a significant portion of our assets. I got something more valuable, the truth, and with it, the chance to rebuild my life on honest ground. Months passed. I threw myself into my work, published 2 papers, and started teaching a new course on modern literature. Slowly, I began to heal. I joined a support group for divorce professionals, where I met others who understood the unique pain of betrayal. Some of them have become true friends, people who value honesty above social appearances. Recently, I heard that Ashley and James had a very public falling out at the annual real estate awards. Apparently, he'd been seeing 3 other women while with her. The news didn't bring me any joy. I was surprised to realize I felt nothing at all. Today, as I write this from my new study, overlooking a different part of Boston, I understand that what happened wasn't about me. Ashley's betrayals, her lies, her phases, they were all about her own character, not my failings as a husband. I'm dating again, cautiously. Jennifer, a literature professor from another university, has shown me that trust is still possible. We take things slowly with honest conversations about our past experiences and future expectations. The pain isn't completely gone, but it's different now. It's more like a scar than an open wound. a reminder of what I survived rather than what I lost. Sometimes when I pass our old favorite restaurants or see places we used to frequent, I feel a twinge of sadness. Not for the loss of Ashley, but for the loss of the life I thought I had. But then I remember that life was an illusion. What I have now is real, and that makes all the difference.